Hey, this is Nathan Dawkin from Fantrax HQ, as well as the NastyCast and Fantrax Dynasty Baseball Podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 144, Smokey and the Bandit Movie Review. Hey, I'm Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. If you want to join our community around here, you can do so on Twitter at Amaron_DM, that's for Derek, and at C McBrien for me. PopGoesYourWorld.com is our website, and you can join us on our Facebook page. Just search Pop Goes Your World, and we post all kinds of Gen X jokes and stuff on there. It's a lot of fun. Derek, how's everything going with you, my friend?
It's going well, Chris. We are in the middle of summer.
Mm-hmm.
The temperatures are crazy right now here in the Greater Toronto area. I'm very fortunate that I have a swimming pool, so that helps me beat the heat. And I'm halfway through my vacation. I got another week to go after this, so it's all is good. All is good considering what's going on in the world around us. This has been a pretty good week.
Yeah, me too. I'm on vacation as well, as you know. I'll be away next week, and I'm just enjoying it as well. There's not much we can really do in this day and age. We can go anywhere, but just enjoying the time. Derek and I actually have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy this podcast, maybe if it helps you in any small way, just to reminisce about pop culture and even get through these tough times, like we mentioned, just please consider taking a minute and going to podcastawards.com, and you can nominate the show in the entertainment category. Nominations are open for the whole month of July, and it only takes a few seconds of your day. It'd be a big boost for us as we're trying to build our community around here. And it really is the community that makes this podcast so special and a lot of fun to do for us. We obviously love doing the show. There's no cost to listen. So just please consider taking time and nominating the show for the podcast award. Again, it's podcastawards.com. Literally a few seconds out of your day. We don't run a Patreon for the show. We don't look for any payment. We don't run ads. But we do need your help to get the show out to as many people as possible so that they can join in on the fun around here, right? We would really appreciate that, wouldn't we, Derek?
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Now, before we get started, we've got a great movie to get to. I can't wait to dive into it, but I am the embarrassing old man with my dad jokes. So
here's your dad joke of the week.
Okay, here it is. Derek, did you hear about the trucker that got caught speeding with a load of donkeys?
No, I did not.
He was hauling
Of course he was. Let me tell you about this Dukes of Hazzard remake I've been imagining.
What are you doing?
Some of this stuff was just too wacky for me.
I am the crotchety old guy who just hates everything new.
They're always having parties.
And then I also watched Three's Company.
This is my lot in life.
Nostalgia is a powerful drug.
It's him and so-and-so in a romantic relationship, and they open an ice cream store. And
it's a dinklage.
he was always making moonshine.
He went on to do gay porn.
Oh, my.
What the hell?
Okay, so this week it was over to me. I got to pick the movie. I went back to 1977 and went with Smokey and the Bandit. And it's a personal film because we both own T-shirts of Smokey and the Bandit, as we've mentioned here on the podcast before. I guess before we get into a deep dive on this movie, Derek, my nomination, you had a chance to watch it. Just your initial thoughts on seeing this movie. I think you said you've seen it in the last 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think the last time. So I have seen it maybe 2 or 3 times in its entirety. I've definitely seen bits and pieces of it over the years. Sometimes it's been on television or something like that. But yeah, I think the last time I saw it in its entirety was probably around 5 years ago. But I honestly didn't have a strong memory of the movie. I remember the broad strokes of it, but I don't want to say it felt new, but there was certainly a lot in it this time that I was like, oh, that's what that's all about, kind of aha moments.
Mm-hmm.
I was certainly interested in going back to watch it again. And as you said, you during our 100th episode, you had gifted me with a Smokey the Bandit t-shirt. So yes. I felt the very least I could do was wear that t-shirt while I watched the movie.
Very good.
Which my wife found hilarious and had to give me a little bit of a ribbing. She said something to the effect of, "That's the same as wearing the t-shirt of a band when you go to see that concert. Like, you should do that." And I was like, okay. So she had a few jokes for me about wearing the t-shirt. And then when I said, "Oh, we're going to go record the episode tonight," she's like, "Where's your t-shirt?" "It's in the laundry. I wore it the other day." And she's like, "You're not even going to wear it for the podcast?" Oh, so first I got crap for wearing it, and now I'm getting crap for not wearing it.
Yeah. I have a t-shirt story too I'm going to drop. Okay. I'll mention it in a little bit. What were your thoughts on going back and watching this movie?
Okay, so I enjoyed the movie. I liked it. I seem to remember that I liked it the last time. So I went in with pretty reasonable expectations, understanding when it was made.
That's an important thing to keep in mind. Yep.
Yes. And understanding that think back to when we did Mad Max, and I said it's basically a 2-hour car chase through the desert. With this one, it was sort of the same thing. I knew it was 90 minutes of basically a car chase across state lines from Texas to Georgia. So it's not going to win the best screenplay for Oscar or any sort of awards like that, but it is what it is. It has a strong entertainment value. Some things held up very well. Some things did not hold up nearly as well, but it was certainly a fun ride, pun intended, to get there, to be able to sit down and watch this movie and enjoy it. It's not something I would have actively sought out, but I was very happy to have a chance to review it again. There's a lot to like about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we dive into the movie. There were certainly a few problem areas, largely just because it is an older movie and things are of their time, as we often speak about with these older movies that were quite rightly problematic, that probably should have been problematic in the 70s, but clearly weren't because it was a different time. That when you look at it through today's lens, a few things were like, "Ooh, boy, you definitely could not do anything like that today."
Yes, indeed. I agree.
But before we really get into it, yes, I have a question for you about this movie that I'm hoping you can answer.
All right, I'll do my best.
Or at least I want to just talk about it for a minute.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, like, unlike yourself, I hadn't seen this movie in, at least 2 decades.
Okay.
So it's been at least 20 years since I've seen this movie.
It's about the finer points of the plot, specifically that, and again, this review, like every review, will be full of spoilers. So if you haven't seen Smokey and the Bandit, what are you doing? Go watch Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah. But, I don't think that this is really going to ruin it if you haven't seen it. So the premise of the movie is that they are in Atlanta and they're asked to go to Texas, to Texarkana, the city right on the state lines between Texas and Arkansas, pick up
400 cases,
truckload of beer, Coors beer, which you were not allowed to bring east of Texas at that time. And so, you're getting 400 cases of beer, bring it back. And if they could do it and not get caught and not get stopped and bring it all the way back to this
in a certain amount of time,
fair, within, I think it was 28 hours or something. There was $80,000 that was going to be, it was like a bet. That's what they kept saying. It's a bet. You'll get $80,000. So I like a good wager as much as the next guy. In fact, I like a good wager probably better than the next guy. I'm a big gambler.
You are.
And this bet made no sense to me, partly because you're calling it a bet. Both sides need to have something they can win and something they can lose. I really didn't understand what the Bandit had to lose in this, other than, not getting paid. Well, if he doesn't do it, he's not going to get paid anyway. So that was my first thing was, what does the Bandit have to lose? And
maybe go to jail?
Well, but he seemed to be a pretty wild and crazy kind of guy again, if he didn't take on this job, that wasn't really a risk anyway. So that, to me, that was the first thing is it didn't seem like a bet as much as it seemed just like a challenge. So calling it a bet really bothered me. The fact that he didn't really seem to have any real stake or any real potential downside to not completing this other than reputation and potentially getting fined or go to jail for all the traffic shenanigans. And the bootlegging. The second thing was the math on this. So the guys, honestly, I can't remember the names, the 2 cowboy guys.
Big and little Enos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were offering them $80,000. So, okay, let me put myself in their shoes for a second. I want this truckload of beer, and I'm going to potentially pay someone $80,000 to do it. Well, I got to think that in order to cover that bet, the beer needs to sell for more than 80,000 for me to, at the very minimum, break even. But I assume they're doing this in part to make money as well. The numbers didn't seem to make sense to me. They were picking up 400 cases of beer. I assume a case in this context is what, 24?
Yeah.
And so this, to me, the numbers didn't seem to make sense. It sounded, again, some quick math. It looked like it needed to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 a case, which would be over $16 per bottle. And this is in 1977. Mm-hmm. So at one point in the movie, he stops to get lunch and a cheeseburger and a soda.
Yes.
Cost him $1.50. So
I remember that. Yeah.
If that is our measuring stick, because again, I don't know what stuff cost in 1977. I was 3 years old. I didn't know. So if a burger and a pop costs $1.50, what does a beer cost? Let's assume $2 or $3 a bottle. Like, okay, so there's a danger factor and your transport. So even if you double it to say $5 or $6 a beer,
it's probably $10 a case,
a ridiculous amount of money on this. It's such a little sticking point for me in the back of my mind. The whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm trying to run the math in my head, and I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I couldn't wrap my head around why they would do it for these numbers. And again, maybe I'm overthinking what should be a very simple plot point, but it's these little details. Now I feel like you. It's like, Chris, explain this to me. I don't understand. So that's what I'm going to finish. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you have any insights on this, please share it, and then we can start our deep dive of this movie.
No, I think it's more that these guys, the Burdettes, the Little Enos and Big Enos, I think it's more that they have lots of money, and they just want to see if anyone could do this, and they kind of enjoy that. And they've had other people do it, and they fail, and they fail, and they fail. And I think that they really enjoy. They know that this cannot be done. Because even in the song, we're going to do what they say can't be done. Right. And so they know people can't do it. So they just love the fact of tempting all these people, knowing that they're never going to have to pay the money. They just like to see all these people going down, and they kind of get off on that. Like, that's just kind of like their thing. So I think that's really what the point. So the fact that they put up 80 grand, they think we're never going to have to pay it anyway. We're just going to see all these suckers just keep taking this challenge and just keep failing. And so I think it was just more of a thing for them. It was just, they like doing that for whatever reason. That's how they get their enjoyment. They got lots of money, so they like seeing people try something that they can't do, and it gives them a sense of power.
I guess. I mean, I thought that as well, but I don't know. It just seemed a little bit silly to me, especially since they couldn't really, like, in today's day and age, you can, if this was, and we can talk about this later, whether or not you could do this in today's world. In today's world, like, all the vehicles would have GPS. They'd be following them on their phones, and there'd be video. Like, you know what I mean? They could be more involved in the observing the day by day, the hour by hour progress. So that, to me, at least adds a slight excitement factor. But the fact that with this was just like, we're going to give you 28 hours, go. And then you either show up or don't within the deadline, like, that just seems so silly to me. But okay, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yep. So this movie, like I say, came out in 1977. It was the first collaboration between director Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds. It was so popular that they went on to work on 6 films in total. After they did this, they did Hooper in 1978, Smokey and the Bandit 2 in 1980, then a personal favorite, The Cannonball Run from 1981, Stroke Race, another one that I liked, from 1983. They did The Cannonball Run 2 in 1984 as well. So they did 6 movies together. Burt Reynolds, though, wasn't in Hal Needham's futuristic masterpiece Megaforce, though, because that was Barry Bostwick.
With Chuck Norris?
No, Barry Bostwick and Michael Beck did all the heavy lifting in that one. But this movie had a budget of $4.3 million, and it made $126 million at the domestic U.S. box office, which was huge for 1977. It only ranked at 4th that year, because that year, 77, had some massive box office hits. Ahead of it was Saturday Night Fever at $139 million, Close Encounters of the Third Kind with $169 million, and then blowing them all out of the water was this little film by George Lucas that year called Star Wars that took home $460 million. But Smokey the Bandit was a huge hit nonetheless. The other thing that you got to kind of go back in time and realize that from 77 to 84, the highest grossing movie star in the world was Burt Reynolds. Yeah. And then he went on to produce a game show called Win, Lose, or Draw. Do you remember that one?
Right. Yes, I remember hearing about this.
Yeah, it was based on a game that he used to play at his house with Dom DeLuise and Vicki Lawrence. And Burt Reynolds at the time was a massively big celebrity and really, really rich. And one thing that I think gets lost a little bit when you think of Burt Reynolds is just actually how good of an actor that he was. I mean, we think of him as the guy from these Hal Needham movies. But the guy was actually a really, really good actor. If you think back to some of his work, like In the Longest Yard and The End, I thought was really good. Deliverance, and even back to his TV days when he was in Gunsmoke. There's also this little movie he was in. It was in 1989 called Breakin' In. Nobody saw it. I'm sure you ever even heard of it.
I have heard of it, but I don't think I've seen it.
So he plays this aging thief. And he basically is showing the ropes to this young guy played by Casey Zemeckis, who was in he was in 3 O'Clock High and the Young Guns movies. But Burt Reynolds was so good at that movie. I mean, the guy can flat out act. And I think it really took until Boogie Nights before people started to kind of remember that about him. You know, that's when he got his only Academy Award nomination for acting in that movie. So my point is, like, he wasn't just this schlocky actor in dumb movies. There was a lot more to his career. But Smokey and the Bandit, probably his most famous role. But the other thing, too, that I want to touch on before we get into the movie are some of the other actors that are in this movie that kind of stand out to me. So Sally Field, she was also a really, really good actress in stuff like Norma Ray that came out in 80, and she won the Academy Award for that. She won an Academy Award in 85 for Places in the Heart, and she was even nominated again in 2013 for Lincoln. So Sally Field is a very accomplished actress, and Jackie Gleason is basically a Hollywood legend. I mean, he was a TV pioneer with The Honeymooners. And I think with a movie like this, it's easy to forget just how good some of these lead actors actually were.
Yeah.
You know, like some of them were just so good. But anyway, so the movie opens up with a couple of cops. They're checking a rig for its cargo, and they find the cases of Coors beer. And the one cop says, so you know it's illegal to transport alcoholic beverages across state lines without a permit? This here's Georgia, son. And I'm thinking, this is where I'm confused with the plot. Is this bootlegging in 1977? Like, you think of maybe this back in Prohibition or something. Like, you can't drive beer across a state line? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. The United States is like a free country, isn't it? I mean, what's going on? It's 77. It's not 1877. What's going on there?
Yeah, my wife and I talked about this at the same time, and it was sort of that combination of this seems silly, they can't do it, and this seems really silly on how would you even enforce this. Mm-hmm. As a law enforcement officer, it just seemed like it would have been a tremendous burden to have to pull over every single rig and ask them to look at their manifest and open up, and yeah, it really didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So Big and Little Enos, Paul Williams and Pat McCormick. Touch base on them for a second. So Paul Williams, he was mostly known as a singer and a songwriter. He's the guy that wrote all the songs for Ishtar, personal favorite of mine, as you know.
So is that the big guy or the little guy? The little
guy. He was a little short guy. And he did some acting. I remember he was in a lot of game shows back then at the time, and he did TV guest spots on, stuff like The Love Boat and Fantasy Island. And then I remember he was in this movie called Phantom of the Paradise, where he played this rock star god named Swan. Anyway, but Pat McCormick was the big guy. He was mostly known as a writer on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. But I thought they were both really well cast. For whatever reason, it worked for me. But anyway, so the movie then is at this trucking event thing. It's like a rodeo, like a car rodeo thing. And this girl goes to give the guy the trophy, and he grabs her and pulls her off the stage and starts kissing her.
Yeah, we saw that.
And the crowd cheers. I was like, oh my God, talk about, you mentioned like different times and, just a different set of sort of collective morals of the day is looked at from the lens of today. It kind of shocked me a bit. I was like, wowzers, couldn't do that today, Definitely a 77 thing, eh?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So it's obviously pretty much clear from the get-go that this movie is pretty much geared toward the Southern NASCAR demographic, but the thing is, it broke ground too. It really struck a chord with mainstream audiences as well. It became a huge hit, right?
Right.
And then I like the first time that you see Burt Reynolds, he's sitting in a hammock and he's got his cowboy hat covering his face, and then he tips the hat back and he gives that trademark laugh.
Yeah.
Like that was a really big thing for him back then. He did that in almost every movie he was in.
I was going to say, I seem to remember did he have like a production company where there were like shows and at the end of the credits they had that laugh, or am I mixing that up with a different laugh?
No, that was his for sure. And I think a lot of that was in a lot of the movies that he did, especially in Cannibal Run. They would run like outtakes during the end credits, and the very last thing was always him doing the laugh. It was a real trademark thing, you know.
Yeah.
And another thing I noticed too, I made a note of this, when Reynolds goes over to Jerry Reed's house at the beginning because he wants to recruit him, right?
Yes.
And Jerry Reed's wife follows him into the kitchen. Great example of ADR. Additional dialogue recording. Remember we talked about in the Pet Peeves episode, her lips don't sync up with her lines of dialogue. And so I'm so glad that we did that show so recently because it just vindicates all this stuff as I see it happen. I'm like, hey, they did loops for that. Anyway, so Jerry Reed is another guy I want to just mention briefly. Pretty much known as a country singer. I mean, he did Guitar Man, and then he did Eastbound and Down in this movie, obviously. But he did some movies. He was in Gator with Reynolds as well. And I remember he was in movies like Hot Stuff and Highballin', and he did a bunch of guest spots on TV. I remember him in the TV show Alice with Linda Lavin being in there.
Yeah, we talked about that show before.
Yeah. But anyway, so we get to the plot of the movie that we kind of talked about. They take the bet from Big and Little Enos to drive to Texas, pick up the cases of beer, and come back. And I like the way that they set it up because they got, Cletus says, well, why are we doing this? And Reynolds says, for the money, for the glory, for the fame, but mostly for the money. Yeah. It's 80 grand, especially in 1977, right? One thing that kind of jumped out to me is I wasn't really sure of the backstory between them. And I know I kind of dig into this stuff a lot in movies. I mean, they were really good friends in real life, obviously. But in the film here, they don't really touch on any backstory that they have. It seems obviously that they've done a lot of stuff like this together before, but they don't really touch base on it, eh?
Well, so this sort of brings me to a point that I picked up for the first time. Again, not that I've seen this movie a lot, but I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. One of the details that I picked up on, or at least I believe I picked up on, was it sounded to me like the Bandit sort of cut his chops as a truck driver. That seemed to me, based on the dialogue, was that he that's sort of how he's made his living, because you always think of him in this movie as, oh, he's the guy in the car, he's the fast driving rah rah rah, but it's like because you see him actually driving up to Snowman's house in the big rig.
He drives it. Yep.
Yeah, and they somewhere in the early dialogue of the movie, someone talks about that, his background as a trucker, as a driver, and not just like the guy in the car, but it sounded to me from the context that it sounded like he was big rig driver. And for some reason, that detail had never occurred to me in the previous times I had seen this, that was his background. But that makes perfect sense because they're all on the CBs and everybody's heard of him and he knows everybody. And it's like, well, how would you know all these people? How would you have this network, this camaraderie? It's like, well, if you've been a trucker for a decade in the South, of course you're going to know these people. And of course people are going to have this reputation. And so many people are like, oh, hey, is that Bandit? Well, come on in and I'll see you here and I'll see you there. And he knows the truck stops and he knows the locations and he knows who can help him. And that it all sort of clicked when I realized that. I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense to me. So my understanding or my assumption about their relationship is that those two guys probably own that truck together. That was sort of my thought, was they share this truck and they probably share any of the revenues that come from transporting things across, state lines or what have you. I could be totally wrong. I could be totally misreading that, but that was sort of my reading between the lines assumption.
Yeah, I think they just kind of gloss over it in the movie, but I think you're definitely right, with all that. I mentioned at the top I was going to tell you a t-shirt story. So I've mentioned on the pod before that my family, we have a trailer that we go to on the weekends in the summer. And just at the beginning of this summer, I was up at the trailer. I was doing some work on the front deck or something like that. I was puttering around and my neighbors beside us always play country music. They got this country music station on. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. Never been a huge country music fan. Okay. But I'm out there. Anyway, I'm out there working. I'm, puttering around. And then Eastbound and Down comes on. And I'm like, oh, yes. I'm like, listen to the song. And there's me in my Smokey and the Bandit t-shirt out in the front working. And it's the same one, obviously, that I got for you. Right. And like I said, I don't really like country music, but I do like this song. And I remember back when I was a teenager, one of my best friends, he loved country music. And whenever we'd be out driving around, he always had country music playing. And I always liked both Westbound and Down and Eastbound and Down. So
I was just going to say that. So I grew up in a household where my parents only listened to country music. So for me, I even though I don't really care so much for country music, like new country music, I have a soft spot for country music from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s because that's all I heard growing up. So I definitely knew this song probably before I knew this movie. And one of the things, again, a little detail I picked up this time around was when they are going at the beginning, when they go from Atlanta to Texarkana, you're obviously driving west across the U.S. And
westbound and down.
They haven't done anything wrong, right? They're they're probably speeding, but they don't have any cargo because the whole thing is take the empty truck there, fill it up, and bring it back. So that only takes 5 minutes of the movie. Like, why waste time on the part of the journey that has no risk?
But it's westbound and down.
It's westbound and down. And
18 wheels are rolling. Yep.
And the lyrics were different because, again, it's just at the very beginning of the movie. And then everything from that point, the next hour plus is eastbound and down because that's where the action happens. That's where the risk is involved. That's when there's the movie picks up. Again, it's just that little detail. I didn't know if it was a separate song or just a separate verse in the main song, but it was a note that I caught this time through, and I sort of smiled, nodded my head, and went, "That makes sense. Good on them for recognizing that and not using eastbound and down when the trucks were driving west."
Yeah, no, because like I say, it was westbound and down, 18 wheels are rolling. And then eastbound and down when they're headed back with the beer, it's eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking.
Right.
Is the lyric. So, I was also going to mention another thing about the Pet Peeves podcast. When we did that show, I also mentioned that one of my pet peeves was the typical Hollywood formula that's used in basically every Hollywood movie ever made. Does not apply in this film. This is one of those rare movies where that Hollywood formula does not apply. For anyone that didn't listen to that episode, I talked about the Hollywood formula of boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. Basically, something happens in the first act, pretty good, set up the story. Second act, everything goes to crap. In the third act, it come back, right? Yeah. This one doesn't, because this plot is basically just a series of things that happen along the trip. There's no second act.
It's a chase movie.
Yeah.
Like I said at the top.
Yeah.
It's point A to point, well, I mean, technically it's point B to point A and then from point A to point B. But like I said, that journey heading west, there's no risk. There's no, again, other than I'm sure they were speeding because they're on the clock. Yeah. There was no real risk. There's no, what are you going to get? Speeding ticket? You're not going to go to jail for that.
Right.
And they only spend 5 minutes on it. And then the rest of the movie is heading east where you have the chase and the series of encounters and the what do you do to avoid the police or to get them off your tail. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, everything doesn't go to crap in the second act. There's no third act where the protagonists solve the problem and save the day. Just a bunch of scenes edited together as a series of masters just to put a movie together. So it's kind of refreshing in that way. You know, I like the fact that it breaks that mold. But right as they get the beer and they start hauling it back to Georgia, a cop follows a Bandit right away, and Bandit like loses him immediately. So automatically it's a setup. You know, this is going to be a cat and mouse chase throughout the movie, right? Yes. And another thing that I thought was interesting, because a couple of things about this movie date it, like you mentioned. One of the things that kind of struck me was they showed the interior of the Bandit's car. It's a 76 Pontiac Trans Am, right? Which, by the way, this movie just helped launch sales of the Trans Am through the roof when the movie came out.
I was reading that,
Really smart of Pontiac to allow the car to be used in this movie. They gave Hal Needham 4 cars. Actually, he crashed 3 of them, and one was just a promo model, you know, to kind of promote the movie. And that's the only one that wasn't in the production of the film, so it survived. But anyway, so when they show the interior...
Hang on, let me go back to the car for a second.
Yep.
So I was reading some of the notes on this after we watched the movie.
Oh, cool.
One of the details that I read, true or false, is they were saying that after the success of this movie, the then president of Pontiac Trans Am, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The president of Pontiac made a deal with Burt Reynolds because the sales were so good and they made all this money that they literally had no idea they were going to make. He said, I will gift you a new Pontiac every year for the rest of your life as long as I'm in this job. And apparently Burt Reynolds ended up with like this massive collection of cars.
I guess so.
And in like, I think they said it was like 2013 or 2014, Burt Reynolds ran into some problems with the IRS and taxes and such, and he had to like generate cash, and he sold like a huge portion of his collection of cars to generate the revenue needed to pay the back taxes. So it sounds like Pontiac made good on that promise, at least for a while, and it was those vintage cars that ended up being sold to settle his tax debts. So again, it's nice when people in power sort of recognize that. Not that Burt Reynolds probably needed the money or the cars at the time, but it's nice to see that camaraderie where they said, hey, we recognize and acknowledge that this is a phenomenon that would probably not have happened without your influence. And so they made good on it. So yeah, I thought that was a nice little, nice little touch.
Cool. Yeah. Like I say, when you first see the inside of the car, it just struck me how dated it was. Because they're showing the CB radio and they show it off like it's the latest in technology, and by today's standards, it's obviously nothing, but they totally play it up. And there's several times throughout the movie, you see shots of the CB radio and all the receivers. And it's like the latest technology of the day. I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, big point of the movie is he's driving down the highway, the Bandit is, and he sees Sally Field in the wedding dress. Right. And so she jumps in the car and then she leaves her van there, and it's so funny. Right away, there's these teenagers that just start like stripping the van for parts. Yeah. Just immediately, they're just
and
like
the one
vultures.
Kid's wearing a Coors T-shirt, which I thought was an extra little wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly, a little Easter egg in there, right? And another thing too with Sally Field, I don't know if they met on set or if they were already dating, because there was a tendency for a while back then with these kind of Southern kind of movies for the stars to have their girlfriends at the time be in the movies with them, because Burt Reynolds was dating Sally Field. And I remember Clint Eastwood did this a lot with Sandra Locke. He would have her in his movies like Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can and The Gauntlet and Bronco Billy. Like they would star them. Anyway, it's just something that I just noticed. But the person I want to talk about though is who comes in next is Jackie Gleason.
Yes.
He is absolutely perfect for this role. He was born to play this part. And then obviously his son is the guy that Sally Field leaves at the altar. So the two of them they're chasing him down, right? And I love the fact that they come across the teenagers ransacking the van. And Justice, Buford T. Justice, lights a cigarette. Again with the smoking in these older movies too. Right?
Yeah, lots of smoking.
But he lights up a cigarette and it just starts roughing up the teenagers. And then he gets the news out of them that the girl got into a car with Bandit, right? So the chase begins. But Jackie Gleason's lines in this movie, my goodness. Like he right at the beginning, because he says, she insulted my son. She insulted my town. She insulted my authority. That's nothing but pure and simple communism. Just like, what? And then he goes, and I went and decorated a whole town at the cost of $40. And I'm like, what? $40 is all yes. And then I thought it was so funny. Some of the things that he says are just so bad by today's standards.
Oh yeah.
Because he's talking about what happened at the wedding. He's like, she was running back up that aisle, knockers bouncing all over the joint. Her was wiggling too. And I'm like, my God, like it was just like shocking to hear the things that this character was saying. And I think at the time, audiences have just been laughing.
Oh, of course. Absolutely played for laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea was that this character embodied the stereotype and was over the top to the point where it was humorous. But by today's lens, a lot of what this character does and says are clearly, it's full of bigotry, it's full of racism, it's full of sexism, it's the down south, good old boy, white guy in power, everything's got to go his way, and if it doesn't, he's the sheriff, he's the power, he can do whatever he wants. And obviously, in the context of this comedy movie, so much of it is played for laughs, and a lot of it is still funny by today's standards, even though some of it's clearly not PC. But if they were to remake this, and again, I want to talk about that later, this is a character that you would have to tweak a fair amount to make him even marginally, well, I don't want to say likable, because I don't think he has to be likable, but to have any sort of sympathy or to make it work. Like, part of the reason certain scenes were funny is you see the bad thing happen to the bad guy in a way that's humorous and embarrassing to him, and you laugh at it. But I think if you were to sort of redo this today and this character had a lot of these same traits, you wouldn't so much laugh at it as sort of nod your head and go, good, I'm glad that happened to that guy. F him. And so I think there's certainly some of the things that at the time were seen as hilarious, definitely not so much today. He
has some of the most inappropriate lines I think I've ever heard in any movie.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many of them. And the thing is, this whole movie is basically sort of driven by Jackie Gleason's lines, especially the way he delivers them too. My God,
yeah.
some of it is so bad. Some of it's funny. Some of it's just awful. It reminds me a bit of All in the Family in the sense that you've got,
I was just about to say that. Yeah,
that racist, misogynistic character, right?
Yeah, but at least with All in the Family, Archie Bunker had a certain lovable quality that deep down you knew that a lot of his bigotry and hatred came from a place of fear. And I think that they played that. Like, it wasn't that he literally wanted to kill his neighbor as much as I think he feared change and what having having the Jeffersons live next door and having his daughter date this hippie. Like, I think for All in the Family, it was, you learned that Archie just disliked the idea of change. He wanted things to stay the way they were when he was younger. And I think over the course of the years of that show, you got to see more of what he's really like inside. That's not to excuse a lot of his deplorable behavior and the things he said, but they tried to portray it in a way where you could at least start to understand why he did what he did. With this character in a 2-hour movie, or not even 2 hour, like 90-minute movie, you don't have that kind of time. Mm-hmm. You do it over the top. You play it for laughs. He says bad things to people, and then bad things happen to him, and it is what it is.
Well, with Archie Bunker's character and All in the Family too, being that bigot, the key for that show to really work was the fact that the bigot wasn't in on the joke. You laughed at him for being a bigot.
Yes.
And that's where Meathead was kind of, like his foil, right? But in this movie, I think Hal Needham is walking a very, very thin line in this movie, because in some ways it almost feels like he's pandering a bit. The director is pandering to the racist and misogynistic tendencies maybe of some of the audience. Sure. And even though, the Bandit has allies throughout the film that are, you mentioned, they're black, they're Asian, they're women. So it's a little tough to distinguish what the message is here. I don't know if it feels like some of this stuff is in there as a little bit of a wink to the audience, almost to legitimize some of these things in a way. I feel like Hal Needham is just really walking a thin line here. At one point, Sally Field leans into the back seat and you see her butt. And it's just
my wife
so
said that. She goes,
blatant.
nice butt shot.
Yeah. And then I remember a trucker warns him there's going to be a roadblock up ahead, and it's set up by these Arkansas cops. So the chase starts. They go over the bridge and they jump over the bridge. And Sally Field is like, I love that. I want to jump something else. And Reynolds goes, well, jump me. I'm like, geez, like some of the dialogue in it was something else. But
and then right after, in that same scene, when the officers try to stop and not crash into the like go over the top of the bridge, which of course they do, and then when Sheriff Justice shows up and he starts like saying, "Where's the local sheriff?" and the guy, he's a person of color, and he's like, "It's me," and then he says to him, "Oh, well, when I was speaking with you on the CB, you sounded taller."
Yeah,
it's clearly a reference. He wasn't talking about his height; he was talking about his skin color. But it's like, again, it's played for laughs, and it's done in a way that you sort of chuckle, but at the same time, you're like, okay, this is a joke at the expense of racism. So
it is, because the next line, he turns to his son as he's walking away, he goes, "What in the hell is this world coming to?" Absolutely. To imply that a black man shouldn't be a sheriff. Yeah. Right? Like, really racist thing to say. But I don't know. As I said, I don't know if it's just the character. Is the movie in on the joke? It's really tough to say. It's interesting. And
I wonder, again, not that I know much about Jackie Gleason, but again, he's an older man. He's passed on now, but at the time he was an older actor from a different time. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how much of this character might have played a little bit to sort of his reputation. I don't know. Like, was he a racist? Like, what was his
I don't know.
background?
Don't know. Well, except that he was, I think that you could say that he always sort of played that misogynistic type of thing. Because if you think back on the Honeymooners, it was always bang, zoom to the moon, Alice. To imply that he was going to punch her.
I'm going to beat up my wife. Yeah.
So I think there was more of that.
I don't know. I wonder if again, you I don't know. It was a different time. And you got to wonder if some of that played into the fact that, you're going to play this racist cop. Was it like in his mind, he's like, oh, well, I've played these kinds of roles before. I know what to do to make it work. And is it like because you're a gifted actor, or is it because like some of this speaks to the way you were. I don't know. Again, I don't know, and I'd hate to imply it if that's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think to go back just a second to when I was saying about Hal Needham, you bring up that scene with that local sheriff. There was another part of that scene that I think needs to be addressed, is the fact when Gleason first starts talking to him on the CB before he meets him, the black sheriff, and the sheriff tells him, he says, "You're out of your jurisdiction."
yes,
And the fact that you're a sheriff is not germane to this situation.
right.
And Gleason goes, "What's the goddamn Germans got to do with anything?" And so it does kind of play up the fact that he's dumb. And so, to kind of make him kind of the joke,
Right. I mean, it doesn't excuse his behavior, but I think it makes a clear point to the audience that this guy is out of touch.
And then later when they go into the diner, like the scene you were talking about when he orders the 2 cheeseburgers and the iced tea, and it's $1.50, because Buford T. Justice walks in. And he doesn't realize it's the Bandit because he's never actually seen what he looks like. And they strike up a conversation. And Justice goes to the bathroom and he comes out with the toilet paper stuck to his sunglasses, and it's unraveling through the whole place and outside into the parking lot. So again,
I laughed at
that. They're obviously portraying him as the fool. And
for sure.
And then like his, those racist and misogynistic comics, make him look like the fool. So I think maybe the more I think about it, the more I think it's that way. But yeah, just the sun is so stupid. They drive the rig underneath the big rig, or they drive the car underneath the big rig there, and the roof shears off. Yeah, Daddy, the whole roof came off, and he's like, "No." Like it's just the things. They're just idiots, right?
And then I love after that the son has to hold the dad's hat.
He holds his hat because there's no roof.
Laugh.
Yeah,
when I realized he was doing that, I laughed. And then later they get out of the car. And he's doing it when they're out of the car, and that made me laugh again. So I thought that was a good visual gag.
Another thing from my pet peeves episode that came up in this one too. There's the scene where Sally Field is driving away from the truck stop, and the Bandit jumps in, and then they have to switch places while they're driving, and she gets up, and obviously they weren't looking at the road for the whole thing. They were being
When he first picks her up, there's a lot of that too, where he's driving, but he's checking her out, especially when she's changing her clothing. Yeah. He spends a lot of time not looking at the road after they've already established that they're going about 110 miles an hour. And I thought, okay, they're clearly, I knew we had talked about this in the pet peeve episode,
right?
And to me, we both had that as a pet peeve. So it bugged me a bit, but given the type of movie this was, I knew that was going to be the reality of the way the movie came together. So I wasn't as critical of it this time around.
And going back to the Eastbound and Down song, when, like I say, my buddy, when I was a teenager, used to play it all the time. I remember at the beginning of the song, like the recorded version of the song, there's some dialogue from the film at the beginning. And I recognize it in the movie right away. Things like pedal to the metal and Kodiak with a Kojak or whatever they say. And so I recognize different parts of that as it was on. But then, just going back to what we were talking about before, some of the kind of sexist comments, Snowman and the Bandit, they finally meet up on the road. Like, because remember, they keep getting sidetracked, so they're supposed to be together. And Jerry Reed meets Sally Field for the first time. You remember what his line was?
Doesn't he say, "Nice"?
Yes.
And then she's like, "Thank you," or something like that.
Yeah, I think she looks at him,
but she can hear him, and she acknowledges that she can hear it.
And it was interesting. Sally Field and the Bandit have a couple of lines there, because she's like, "What do you really do?" And he goes, "I just go from place to place and do what I do best." Well, what's that? Show off. And I realized Burt Reynolds is basically playing himself in this movie.
Yeah, of course he is.
And I mentioned earlier, he's a really strong actor. But I think the thing is, in these Hal Needham movies, he just basically plays himself. And that's probably why people also overlook his acting chops. Because this is where people remember him for the most, and it's where he acts the least, in all of his work, right?
Yeah. And then there was one of the early scenes when I think it was the very first time he's trying to draw the police away from the truck right after they leave. He's going through like a little small town to try and stop the cops. And then he pulls up on the lawn and goes around the backside of a building. And then when the cops go by and he starts to pull away, he looks right at the camera and gives that sort of trademark smile and then drives away. And I laughed because I know that's one of the things that he does in a lot of his movies as well. The comedies anyway, where he literally breaks that fourth wall and looks at the audience and sort of makes a gesture like, "Hey, how cool is this?"
And then when they run in, another thing I noticed, they run into another roadblock. There's a couple of them in this movie, and the cops are basically portrayed as bumbling idiots.
Yeah, of course.
It's like the Keystone Cops from the 30s or something like that. So, so again, we mentioned there's Asian and black characters that help the Bandit, and Gleason is just this racist that loses at every turn. So maybe that is the message. The more I think about it, the racist is the loser, which is good to see at any time, especially back in '77. I guess.
I love there was one of the scenes later on when after the car, the Gleason's car has been all beat up, and the local state trooper pulls him over. I think there might have even been a roadblock, and he's like, starts, do you think you can drive this car? You shouldn't be out with like a piece of crap like this. And he starts mouthing off to him, and then Gleason like sort of, instead of trying to be calm about it, he just goes over the top and yells at him, and he's like, how dare you do this, and this is who I am, and this is who I'm in pursuit of, and how dare you use language like that, and then he just puts the young guy right back on his heels and go, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't realize that's who you were and what you were doing, and I hope I can help, and I hope you accept my apology. And then right when the whole scene's over, he's like, okay, yeah, I accept your apology. And then he's like, now, and you can read his lips. He's like basically tells him to F off.
Yes,
but there's a horn that goes off, a truck horn over top of the expletive.
Yep.
And again, the scene itself actually worked really well. And then the honk over the F word made it even funnier.
Yeah,
and then again, when I was reading about it, they said if he dropped even a single F-bomb anywhere in the movie, it would have to immediately get an R rating.
Right.
And by doing that, they were able to keep the PG rating and add an extra joke into the movie. So it was like a double win. So I thought that was really good. I laughed a lot at that part.
Right at the end there, Gleason has so many good lines. The one that always got me was when he says, "Psalm bitch." Not son of a bitch, but psalm bitch. Like, it's all in the way he delivers his lines. But he's got a whole bunch. He's like, I'm going to barbecue your ass in molasses. And then when the things that he says to his son, and especially about the mother, he's like, there's no way you came from my loins. And then he says to him, when I get home, I'm going to punch your mama right in the mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, kids, some of these lines are just, but again, like.
But I wonder, hang on, Chris, I wonder if that was supposed to be like a wink, wink reference to his honeymoon character.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because that's what he did, just like we said, right? So, but still doesn't really, doesn't make it good. No, but
it's not cool.
But the one thing I thought was interesting, right near the end of the movie, the Bandit says something that I think somewhat sadly kind of even resonates today. Because he says, when you tell somebody something, it depends on which point of the United States you're standing in as to just how dumb you sound.
Yeah.
And that might have been true in 77, but unfortunately it's just as true today. There's such a divide in the country. We see it with racism. We've seen it with wearing masks during a pandemic. We see it in regard to truth and justice and just about everything. 40 years later, nothing's really changed for some people. And in a lot of ways, that's incredibly sad. I thought it was a great line in the film. It really stood out to me. Whereas I think before, when I saw this movie, 30 years ago, whatever it was probably just a throwaway line. But for me, it really resonated. I thought it was an interesting line. So, one more thing about the questionable material and questionable lines. Sally Field says to the Bandit, she says, hey, I just noticed truckers going by can look right down into the car. And he says to her, that's what I used to love about being a trucker. You could look right down and spot those.
Oh, is that what he said? Yeah. I missed the line. I remember the dialogue, but I couldn't hear what he said.
Yeah.
And again, that enforces the presumption I made at the beginning when he talks, where it's like, I think he was originally a trucker. So, yeah.
Oh, and I also noticed that the Bandit has a Confederate flag on his license plate too.
Yeah, we did notice that.
Interesting. Too. Yeah, interesting in this day and age. So anyway, so they get to the end, they make it on time. And then what happens, of course, Big and Little Enos go double or nothing to bring back some clam chowder. Just to keep the bet going, right?
Have you seen Cannonball Run 2? Is it does it pick up? Is it the race to get the clam chowder, or is it totally different?
Good question. Couple things. Yes, I have seen Cannonball Run 2. I saw it in the movie theater. I also went to see.
Not Cannonball Run 2.
I'm sorry.
Smokey and the Bandit 2.
Yeah, sorry, getting our Hal Nita movies mixed up. I saw Smokey and the Bandit 2 in the movie theater when it came out, and I also saw Smokey and the Bandit 3 when it came out. A little note on Smokey and the Bandit 3 that was originally called Smokey is the Bandit. So the idea of the third movie was that the Smokey, Jackie Gleason's character, was now the bandit. He was going to be doing illegal things and taking stuff. And it just didn't work with audiences, like test audiences. They were like, oh, this is stupid. So they went back and they brought Jerry Reed in and made him become the Bandit. And then they recut some of the scenes and kind of put it together. The movie was an absolute disaster. It was a mess.
Wow.
But the second one, to answer your question, so I've seen all those two movies in the movie theater. The second one wasn't. It was with Dom DeLuise, and they were taking an elephant across the country, of all things.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I think I might have seen parts of it way, way back when, but I definitely haven't seen it in 30 years or more, if I have indeed seen it in its entirety.
I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely a different time, but I'm glad we went back and watched it. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Clearly a movie from a different time, but I also think it's worth going back and watching if you haven't seen it in a long time.
So let me ask you this, Chris. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned at the top, we were talking about box office success.
Yes.
So I was having a discussion about this movie with someone earlier this week, and they made a good point. I was saying, like, hey, did you know the Smokey the Bandit was like one of the top grossing movies of 1977, and really obviously didn't make the top of the list in large part due to Star Wars, because Star Wars was such a huge phenomenon. And then, my buddy turned to me and said, how many people that summer in 1977, because if I remember correctly, Star Wars came out, they both Smokey the Bandit and Star Wars were originally released in May of 77, with Smokey the Bandit first being released in the southern US in a more limited release, and then eventually being rolled out to the rest of the country. How many people through the course of the summer do you think went to the movies, wanted to see Star Wars, couldn't get in because it was sold out, didn't want to stand in the line, and just went, okay, what else is playing? Smokey the Bandit, done, let's go see that instead. And I wonder how much of their box office success was a direct result of the fact that Star Wars was sold out everywhere.
That's a really good point, because they were both, like you say, released in May, late May.
Yeah.
And that could have very well been the situation.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
I never thought about it, because I'd heard that stat before where they were like, oh, Burt Reynolds was the top grossing actor for all these years, and Smoking the Bandit came out the same year as Star Wars, and it made all this money, and it wasn't number one. I've heard some people say that Smoking the Bandit was number 2 behind Star Wars. I think it depends on whether you're looking at worldwide or domestic or just the summer, depending on how you slice the numbers. In some cases, Smoking the Bandit was number 2 to Star Wars, a very distant number 2 to Star Wars. And so, yeah, that was an interesting point that I had never considered until just this week when it was brought to my attention. So it's an interesting question to ask. And
interestingly enough, Smoking the Bandit made more on its opening weekend box office than Star Wars did.
Yeah. Wow.
Because I mean, Burt Reynolds was in it. People knew Star Wars. They didn't know what this was.
Right.
And so Smokey the Bandit outgrossed Star Wars for its first weekend, but then people that saw Star Wars went, whoa, and word of mouth just spread like wildfire, right?
Yeah, that was it.
But unreal. That was a good question. So I'd like to say overall, I was really glad that we went back and watched it. Do you want to give it a rating out of 10?
I would say I would give it maybe a 7. I mean, I liked it. There was a lot to like about it just from its broad strokes. And I mean, the performance, you have Burt Reynolds and Sally Field. They were both great. Obviously there were some problems when you look at it from today's lens. There were certainly problems, but at its heart, I think the movie was pretty decent and it's entertaining. So yeah, I think seven's probably about right for me. What about you? What do you think between 1 and 10?
I think I would do the same thing. I would give it a 7.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So yes. I mentioned this a couple of times through the podcast already. Is this a kind of movie? Do you think they could remake this, call it Smoking the Bandit, and have a similar type of story to what was portrayed in this movie, where if it was set today, do you think it would work? Or do you think, given today's modern technology, there's just no way? Would the police be too well coordinated through technology and GPS and things like that they would just be able to stop them? Or do you think that there would be a way that this kind of a story could work?
Well, the thing is, I don't think the police really come into play too much, because they weren't really after him. It was really Jackie Gleason that was after him for other reasons than him hauling the beer. The hauling the beer wasn't the issue. It's the fact that he left, he had Sally Field with him, right?
Yeah.
So do I think that they could remake it today? Yeah, they probably would, because they remake everything. And you know how much I hate that. Do I think it would work? Absolutely not. No, this movie is rooted in the time that it's set, with the CB culture and stuff like that. I just don't think it would work. I think it would be terrible.
Yeah. And I think a big part of its success is Burt Reynolds. And I think when you remove that part from the equation, any sort of remake, you have very few people working today that have that same charisma and star power and likability and the kind of person that people want to meet just to go and have a beer with kind of person. I just think they would have an exceptionally hard time casting this movie correctly to even have a chance at success today. So I agree with you. I don't think they could make it. I think if anything, they could say influenced by the events of the Smokey and the Bandit movie, but it would be a very different movie.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point because Burt Reynolds appeals to both men and women. Like men like him because they think he's cool, like guy you want to hang around with, and women like him because he's good looking. And not a lot of actors are like that. There's some actors that women like and then guys don't like or something, or vice versa. But the key thing is not even him; it's the other actors, as I mentioned, like with Sally Field and Jackie Gleason, and Enos and Jerry Reed's character. You'd have to get so many good actors to play these parts that are just, and not even that they're good actors, they were just perfect for the part. Like Jackie Gleason was perfect for that part. I couldn't imagine anyone else pulling it off. I just couldn't. I mean, who else is going to play that part from today? What are they going to do? But they put like Jack Black in it or something like that. It would just be terrible. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I think they would remake it, but I think it would be awful. So I hope that they never do it.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they made 3 movies out of it before they called it a day, I think there's obviously a track record to demonstrate what has and hasn't worked when you try and capture lightning in a bottle a second and third time. So I would hope like normally I'm not automatically opposed to a remake of something or a modernized update of a story if it makes sense. But I would think that if you wanted to do something like this today, number one, you'd have to address the gender roles. I think you would have to make the Bandit a woman, 100%. And other than that, I think, you would have to add some additional modern factors, modern complications that were not things that could have ever been in the original movie in order to make it work in today. But no, I don't. This is not one that I think there would be a tremendous amount of success for, or really even that much of an appeal, because the original is now, from 77. It's what, 40 years old?
Yep.
I think
43. Yeah.
The nostalgia value of a remake is lost. The audience that was in love with the Smokey and the Bandit movie in the 70s is now so much older that they're not going to go out and watch a remake of it. You need to, remakes in my mind need to be like in that 20 to 25 years at most. I think beyond that, you lose the benefit of calling it something familiar. Anyway, long way to say that I don't think that a remake would work.
I hope that they never do remake it. That's all we can hope. All right. On that note, let's have some
fun with Caveman.
All right. Over to you, my friend. What have you got for us?
So I know how much you love 80s game shows.
I do.
So we're having another trip to the $100,000 pyramid.
Yes! Awesome. All right.
So
I'm in the winner's circle. I'm ready to go.
Yes. So I was thinking about this when I was getting this ready today, and it occurred to me that we haven't been following the rules correctly, because in the $100,000 pyramid, you don't just automatically start playing for 100,000. You start playing for a lesser amount in the first half of the show.
Yep.
And then if you get to the top of the pyramid, you play a second round, and that's when you go for the big money.
And then you actually have to come back and they have a tournament for the 100,000.
But even during the show, it's like you do the 10,000 and then the 25,000. So to get the big money, you have to prove it that you are good enough to do this twice. Okay. So tonight, you're going to go to the pyramid twice.
Oh, geez. Oh, right? Man. All right.
So now, I don't want to make this too difficult for you.
Okay.
So I'm going to explain that I'm setting these 2 rounds up in very much the same way.
Okay.
First round, I'm going to give you the cast of movies starring Sally Field.
Okay.
These are people that were in movies, Sally Field movies, that were her co-stars.
All right.
And when you name the movie, we'll move on. There's 6 of them on the list. And then if you're good, once you've got that one done, we'll do a second round, same deal, but with Burt Reynolds.
Okay. All right. Yep.
First round, Sally Field. Now, to make it even a little bit easier for you, we're going to start with older films. Okay. And as we move down the list and up the pyramid, they're going to get newer and newer and newer and newer.
That doesn't help me. That doesn't help me much, though, because I'm good with the old movies.
No, I know, but just if you find you're getting stuck, think about what movie did we just say?
It'll
You know,
be
at
yours.
least it's going to be a year later than that, or in some cases, a few years later than that. Okay.
Yep.
So, first round of the pyramid here. I just got to make sure I did a few extras just in case. I just got to make sure I deleted my extras so we're not doing 8 or 9.
Just do 6.
5, 6. Okay, just checking. Okay, so we're going to start with Sally Field. Okay.
Yep.
No trick questions here.
Nope.
Broad strokes.
You're listing cast members, and I got to guess the Sally Field movie that it is.
Okay. And we're going to start old, and we're going to move to newer.
Go
okay?
for it. All right.
Ready? Go. Bo Bridges, Ron Liebman, Pat Hingle, Barbara Baxley, Bo Bridges. Okay, we're going to pass that one.
Okay, pass.
Tom Hanks, John Goodman.
Oh, was it Punchline?
Julia Roberts, Shirley MacLaine,
Oh, Steel Magnolias?
Kevin Kline, Kathy Moriarty, Elizabeth Shue.
Is it Soap Dish?
It is Soap
Yes.
Dish. All right. Robin Williams, Harvey Fierstein, Pierce Brosnan, Mara Wilson, Robert Prosky.
Oh, is this Mrs. Doubtfire?
It is Mrs. Doubtfire. Okay. Robin Wright, Haley Joel Osment,
Forrest Gump?
Gary Sinise. Yeah, Forrest Gump. Okay,
Back to the one I missed. Yep.
Old movie.
Okay.
Bo Bridges, Ron Liebman, Pat Hingle,
Was it
Barbara
Stay Hungry?
Baxter. What's that?
Was it Stay Hungry?
No, it wasn't. Big movie from Sally Field. Come on, you got this.
Is it Norma Ray?
All right, just made it to the top of the pyramid. Good job, buddy.
Oh, boy.
All right. Okay, so we got our Sally Field down pat.
Okay, now
Chris,
we gotta-
you won the 10,000 fictional dollars here.
Okay.
So we're gonna move for the really big money now.
Yep,
Okay,
moving
we're
on to
gonna
the
jump
big
right
stuff.
into the 100,000. So just shake that off and forget everything you ever knew about Sally Field and put your Burt Reynolds brain on.
Burt Reynolds cap on. Okay.
Right? These are all Burt Reynolds movies. I think you're going to do very well on this. They're maybe a couple of the new ones might trip you up a bit, but I think the older ones you
Old
got.
ones I should be able to get, I hope.
All right. Okay. Are you ready? Just let's take a second, clear your mind.
Okay. Go.
Jack Weston, Jerry Reed, Lauren Hutton, Alice Ghostley.
Is it The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing?
Nope. Jerry Reed.
Oh, Gator?
Gator. There you go. Good job. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Dom DeLuise, Charles Durning,
The End?
Jim Neighbors,
Oh, it's Cannonball Run?
Dolly Parton.
Oh, Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Jackie Chan, Roger Moore,
That was Cannonball
Peter
Run.
Fonda. Cannonball Run. You got it. That was a huge guess there. All right. Ned Beatty, Jim Neighbors, Parker Stevenson.
Oh, Stroke Race.
Stroke Race. Good job. Okay. Don Cheadle, Heather Graham,
Oh,
Louise
Boogie Nights.
Guzman. Boogie Nights. Okay, last one. This is a tough one, Chris. Russell Crowe, Hank Azaria, Mary McCormick, Cole Meany, Mike Myers, Phil Esposito,
Oh, my goodness.
Russell Crowe, Hank Azaria. Come on. Do you know this?
No. Is it The Longest
Phil
Yard?
Esposito.
Phil Esposito. I don't know. Oh, jeez. I don't know. I
It was
have
it
no
was a
idea.
hockey movie. It was called Mystery Alaska.
Mystery Alaska. I don't even think I've
Came out
even
in
heard of it.
1999. With Russell Crowe? No, you don't know that one?
Never even heard of it, I don't think.
Oh,
Oh,
I figured Phil
jeez.
Esposito was like the
No.
wink, wink, wink.
Oh,
Like here, he's gonna know it's a hockey movie. Phil Esposito, hockey legend.
Oh man, go figure. I knew the Sally Field movies better than I knew the Burt Reynolds movies.
Yeah, no, I figured this one might be a little bit tough for you, but
man.
well, no, you
That
did
was
amazing.
good. That was
So,
good.
the first round, you got to the top of the pyramid. Second round, you
Second
missed
one
the
ran
last
out.
one. But, Yeah, no, you did great. Clearly, you know your Sally Field. Clearly, you know your earlier Burt Reynolds.
Later
That
Burt
Cannonball
Reynolds,
Run
not so much.
cast was crazy. I'm looking through the list here, and it was Jamie Farr, Burt Convey, Terry Bradshaw, Adrienne Barbeau, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Dom DeLuise,
Mel
Farrah
Tillis.
Fawcett, Peter Fonda, Roger Moore, Jackie Chan. I was like, holy crap! And this was just the first 12 on the list.
I know.
Like, this movie is full of stars. Holy smoke!
It was huge, man. No, it was great. Oh man. So so I did all right, I guess. Next episode, we're going to take a week off because we're going to have some more holidays coming our way. When we come back, it's going to be your turn to nominate a movie. So what movie would you like me to watch?
Well, before we do that, let me ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yep.
If we're going to take next week off, any chance we can throw up a greatest hits?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we do that?
All right.
We'll throw up best of Pop Culture World with Fun with Yancey, Fun with Caveman for sure. Yep.
Right. So if you love the trivia segments, we got one of the classics coming up next week. Then, since we're not going to have a new episode out, so when we come back, we come back in 2 weeks with a new episode, brand new episode. Yep. We're going to do a movie that I'm choosing.
Yes.
And
what have you got?
All right. So I'm going to go a little newer than I sort of like to keep my cutoff around 1999. I figure anything before that is sort of more Yancey's wheelhouse. I like to try and pull things like that are much newer, but this is one that's been on my list for a while. It's from 1998.
Okay.
And it's called Pleasantville.
I've heard of it. Is that Reese Witherspoon?
Yes, it's got Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire. It's got William H. Macy, Joan Allen, Jeff Daniels. It's got a stellar cast. It's so it came out in 1998. It's I actually saw the Canadian premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival in 1998, and it's outstanding. I really don't want to get too much into it now because I don't want to give anything away. I don't really want to ruin it.
No, don't. I don't know much about it either, so I'll go in fresh.
So, I mean, you and I exchange notes back and forth between shows, and I'll give you a list of 5 or 6 movies and go, have you seen any of these? So I knew this was one you hadn't seen before. And I think there's a lot to like about this movie. And they've been running it on cable a fair amount over the last month or two. So I've actually watched bits and pieces as I've seen it coming up. And that's part of the reason I thought I want to watch this again, just because it's now top of mind. But also, I think it touches on a lot of themes and ideas that are just as relevant today as they were in 1998 when the movie came out. And I think that it'll give us a good opportunity to talk about the movie and talk about some other things in context of the movie. So go back, watch the movie Pleasantville from 1998. And we'll come back in 2 weeks and we'll review the movie and we'll see what you think.
No, absolutely. I'm up for that. And like I mentioned at the top, if you do enjoy the podcast, please take a few seconds of your day and go to podcastawards.com and you can nominate us in the entertainment category. We're on the drop down list there. If you would like to reach out to us and be part of the community around here, again, on Twitter at Amaron_DM for Derek, at C McBrien for me. And you can check out our Facebook page and some of the crazy stuff that we post on there all the time. So until next time, this is Chris McBrien on behalf of Derek Myers saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.